this lesson, we're going to detail our boiler model by using some of the newly created hardware we just made. So what I'm going to do is go into Hardware layer, select the nut and bolt. I'm going to right click that. We have the option to clone right here in the quad menu. Click clone. I'm going to say as a copy, OK. Let's click on here up to the boiler layer, make it active, plus sign, and now our clone should be on there. If we hide the hardware layer, you see that the bolt is there. It's because it's now living on this layer with the boiler. And what we're going to do, I'm going to take that bolt, let's select, we're going to control click on this front section of the boiler, and then we're going to hide unselected. We are on the boiler layer, so I'm going to hide the layer manager. Okay, let's take this guy, move him back so he's roughly left viewport in the middle of this tab here. And because this is such a large scale machine, they probably did use hardware bigger than what we're used to seeing. I'm going to scale this up. It's just what looks right. We know that the train itself is scaled properly based on the size of the wheel at the very beginning of the lesson. So I'm going to take this bolt, let's scale it up a little bit just as we did. I'm going to go to perspective. I'm going to hit F4. I'm going to move it back a little bit. That's good. I'm going to estimate, just based on where the polygons fall, what's the center point of that door. I think it's up here a bit, right there. Okay. I'm going to just nudge it in a touch more so it's just a slight intersection, just like that. Okay. So now what I want to do is run these things, these bolts and nuts, right around the edge of this. So there is a working pivot in Max now, but I find for my workflow I like to do this. Keep that selected, control click the front section of the door or the boiler. Let's go to Effect Pivot only. Let's just do the door right now. Make sure our center to object, it is, align to world, it is, now it is. And we'll now click on the bolt. Effect Pivot only again. We're going to use this align tool, and what we're going to do is click on this pivot point, and it's going to align the other pivot to that one, and we're going to say yes to X, Y, and Z position. OK, and we're going to deselect both, turn off Effect Pivot only first. Let's select this bolt and nut combination, Effect Pivot, align to world. It's aligned to the world. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the rotate tool with angle snaps on, and we're going to hold down shift. Let's rotate this 15 degrees. We'll make them an instance for this purpose, for this part of the lesson, just because these are all going to be the same. We want them similar. And I'm going to say if we went 15 degrees, we need a total of 24, I believe. So we're going to say 23 instances. That excludes the original. OK. And there you see they now go around the outer rim. They may not be perfectly aligned, you can see they're not, but I'm not worried about that right now. So let's do this. Let's select this door. Control I to invert the selection. And let's go to Shift and B as my hotkey for the back viewport. F3. Let's just move them all as one right now. That looks good. Let's go back to perspective. Okay, so they're all floating a little above, and it's not bothersome because what I'm going to do now is just take my scale by view, just pull that a little bit. There we go. And now they're all intersecting. They look like they've been driven in or turned in with a wrench, and that's pretty much how I want them to be. So on the fly, if you're modeling and something doesn't work right, think of how to solve the problem quickly, and that was the way to solve that problem. I just simply scaled them down a little bit, and they're perfectly spaced. They just weren't perfectly spaced even though we aligned pivots to the front door. So now they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this bolt, and you'll see that the pivot is still aligned to the center. That's okay. We're going to shift and grab that transform gizmo. I'm going to shift, grab that, pull it forward. I'm going to say a copy, and now we're going to go to pivot align. We're going to Effect Pivot only, center to object. Okay, for the time being we want to do that. I'm going to go to top viewport, take a look at this, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Make sure your angle snaps are active. There's 90. Let's go to left viewport. We want to make sure it's aligned straight, which it is. Okay. Let's just take the move tool. We're going to move that a little back like that. What we want to do is get it close to the front surface so that it's, sorry about that, so that it's just like that. Kind of bolts that are also on the front surface and going around. And now what we're going to do is effect pivot again. I'm going to control and click on the front door section. That pivot is really where we ultimately want the pivot for this bolt to be. So by using Align, clicking on that pivot, X, Y, and Z position, if it's not already checked, check it. OK. Turn off effect pivot only. And let's grab that one bolt we just put on the front. And before we do the cloning and you know, rotating it around the front surface, let's offset it from the ones that are there. It doesn't have to be in the middle because it'll look too perfect. I like this. So that little bit. And now I'm going to come in. I'm going to hold down Shift. Use the rotate tool, 15 degrees, as we did before. As an instance, 23 of them. OK. And you can see right there, we now have some detail at the front there, and it looks really good. It's how it should look like. Steam locomotives have a lot of bolts on the surface, and that looks really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the layer manager, go to the boiler layer, it's active. Let's go over here and unhide all. We'll say no. Okay, here's the boiler showing. Let's select that middle, that first bolt we started with earlier. It's like at the midpoint. And let's select the boiler. Let's hide unselected. Okay, we can hide the layer manager. We're working on the boiler layer as we were before. Select the boiler, effect pivot only, center to object, align to world. Okay, let's grab this guy, effect pivot only, center to object, align to world. Turn that off. And now with control, while we have that bolt selected still, let's control and click on the boiler. Let's turn on effect pivot only, use the align tool, and we're going to click on the center of the boiler, which is right there. X, Y, and Z position, OK. And now we have the pivot for this bolt is now aligned to the boiler. So, as earlier, let's kick this guy back. And what I noticed doing research is that this front section sometimes will be painted a different color, silver or something. It has this little recess. I guess this is an add-on, like it's not part of the rest. And this is the only part, this seam right here, there's bolts on both sides, at least from what I've seen. If you see a different train, you can adjust accordingly. And what we want to do is we want to just make an array of bolts around this side and that side of the seam. So first thing I'm going to do, rotate tool as we did earlier. Snaps are active. I'm going to take this rotate. I'm going to go 15 degrees. Instance 23. Enter. OK. There we go. And now I'm going to select the boiler, Control I to invert the selection. And there's a chance, as we had it earlier, that they're floating above the surface, and they are. But if we go to View, Scale Uniform, let's just scale that slightly. There you go. And you can see that they're perfectly aligned and intersecting the surface nicely. So rather than do this a second time, let's just do this. We have them all selected. Effect pivot only, you can take this and just move it up if you want to, just like that. Click off effect pivot only. I'm going to shift drag them all out back this way. I'm going to say as a copy. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is scale and scale them up a little, just like that. And let's zoom in a little bit. They look good. F4. And let's also do this. I don't want them perfectly aligned again. This is important when you're building stuff. It's so important to make it look like it was made by hand. So I think just by offsetting things a little or a little wobble here and there, maybe we put a bolt that's not lined perfectly to the surface, things like that. These are ways that you make your models look like they're made by hand. And especially with a train or something old, there should be some inconsistencies, I think. I think like when we run the lines later, there should be a little wobble. There shouldn't be a perfect looking line because then it looks like a toy or something that's CG. So we now have those bolts. And what we're going to do is in the next lesson or the next video, we'll just add some steam lines along the side of this boiler. So let's do that.